I think most people would probably expect to say like, oh yeah, isn't it really dangerous? So depressing there, this and that. And very much not my experience. So I moved to Detroit about 6 months ago, and I thought it'd be cool just to kind of do a little like tour around and just share my experiences. Definitely different than what I expected. Standing right now in front of Michigan Central, which historically was a famous train station, which was abandoned for some time, just reopened, not as a train station, but it might be one again. There's a lot of interesting things that go on in Detroit, and I wanted to just give my perspective. It's not necessarily gonna be the like top places to go in Detroit, but you might find some of those things. One of the things to note that the past 4 months, I've been car-free in Detroit, in the Motor City. It wasn't 100% by choice that I'm car-free, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Definitely a bit more focused on like biking, bike infrastructure, public transportation or lack thereof. We're gonna ride today on this bike. It's a cargo bike. Tara's gonna sit in the front and let's enjoy. You might be wondering why I moved to Detroit. I did make a video on that a bit, talking about this new company I started with my co-founder, Justin. It's at this place called New Lab, which is actually right next to Michigan Central here. So the new company, in simple terms, we're really trying to encourage more domestic manufacturing and assembly of electric bikes and other light electric vehicles, but we're also supporting like warehousing, logistics, different things like that. And we felt like Detroit is a really good place to start a business like that, because if you want to make things, this is one of the places in America that they're still really making things at scale. And there's so much expertise and experience here. You know, I think if we're gonna start something anew, we need to borrow from what's here already. Right next to me is New Lab, and there's a really amazing shop space, advanced machinery, CNC machines, laser cutters. We have a laser tube cutter, robotic welding, and we're really experimenting with kind of the future of manufacturing. The idea of like what is actually possible to build here and how we can do it in a more efficient and effective way. This area that we're in is called Corktown. It's one of the oldest neighborhoods of Detroit. Detroit has a lot of interesting history. I'm no sort of history buff. I mean, I try to learn what I can and I'll try to share some of that with you. I'm sure some folks can kind of chime in the comments, their own experiences. Famously, everybody loves going to Honeybee Market. There's a couple Mexican restaurants over here. There's one spot that I go to get tamales all the time. We're starting pretty early here today. Right now, it's about 7:25 in the morning, to allow us to get around without the commotion as much. So I'm no sort of expert on this stuff, but this hopefully gives you a little bit of perspective of somebody new, but not totally new to Detroit. Here, this is like a little pedestrian bicycle bridge. It's basically crossing the roadway to the bridge to Canada. A lot of people are very surprised how close Detroit is to Canada. So right over to our left here is the bridge to Canada. One of the things, if you're not careful, you can very easily end up in Canada, because there's kind of just like an exit. You got to get off the highway, and if you don't take that exit, you kind of end up in Canada. Hey, Mexicantown, different restaurants. Although there are cars, it still has a little bit of a like kind of walkable vibe to it. And you could imagine in the evenings and such, it's a pretty nice place to be. I could smell the tortillas being made right now. I guess this also will show you that although Detroit is a pretty big city geographically, you could still get around most places by bike without too much trouble, especially in the more like downtown areas. So my first time to Detroit was about a year ago. I think most people would probably expect to say like, oh yeah, isn't it really dangerous? So depressing there. Very much not my experience. There's really like a very lively, creative energy that exists in Detroit, kind of similar to New York. One of the things I really like about New York is the creative energy. You know, you kind of need to be creative to live in New York. And I think there's a similar sort of thing with Detroit, that you kind of need to be creative to live here on some level, but it's for different reasons. I mean, New York, you need to be creative just to survive in the very tight spaces of New York. Here, maybe you just need to be creative in your thinking and how you're working and living in this kind of unique place. It's a playground. One thing I noticed as someone with a young kid is that there's not that many playgrounds in Detroit. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just that there was like not as many families living here, or I don't know, maybe somebody can answer that, but something a little bit frustrating to me as a parent of a young child. For many, as like a young single person, they might be like, oh, I want to be near like bars and restaurants and whatever else. I just want to be near a playground. This is St. Anne's Church here. So this version of the church is 1886, but I think the original church is 1701, which I guess is like one of the first churches. Tara was just mentioning how it is really nice to be able to bike around a city, to get to know it, to see it and everything like that. You're able to see and experience the city in a more intimate way. You're not afraid to like make the little like random stop or whatever the case may be. There's definitely pretty good bike infrastructure, not demonstrating that right here. There is a really good noodle spot right here, Johnny Noodle King. And I think that that's an important thing to call out, how great the restaurants are. And another playground, really making me look like a liar here. But we're gonna hop on a bike lane. We are on a roadway bike lane. There are some like pretty decent protected bikeways, which is kind of cool. I wanna get, oh, sorry about this. Ugh. For those of you wondering if you could bike around Detroit, you certainly can. There's pretty good bike infrastructure. And I was speaking with a new friend, Jason Hall, this guy that started the Detroit Slow Roll, said that actually a lot of this infrastructure wasn't here before the slow roll or before the pandemic. A lot of it's pretty recent. It's kind of encouraging to hear and to see. Definitely from my perspective, it changed some of the perception of the Motor City. This is a path that I ride to work every day. Technically part of the Louis Greenway. It's always nice when you're separated from cars. To the right of us here is actually a railway. This is a train crossing that goes under the Detroit River into Canada. It's one of the kind of special features of the area, particularly for commerce and different things like that. One thing I will note is the playgrounds that do exist, quite a few of them are pretty special. Good amount of graffiti and art in Detroit, and other types of art as well. Music is a big one, but this is called the Southwest Graffiti Museum. So this is an apartment building called the Assembly, and the parking lot of the Assembly has something called the Detroit Smart Parking Lab. It's a joint venture between a couple of different groups, including Bedrock, which is a major real estate developer in the area, started by Dan Gilbert, Bosch, MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They showcase all sorts of really interesting technology. They have everything from like different charging infrastructure for cars and for bikes and other mobility devices. They have certain like autonomous parking options. This is Centennial Park, should be completed in the next year. And this will be part of a connected path for bikes. Along the path, there's several parks and other sorts of features which we'll go and explore now, actually. But this park is really quite elaborate and unique, a kind of slide being held by a bear or whatever that is. So they have like all sorts of water features and different things like that. But so the Detroit Riverwalk, they say that it's like the best in the country. I'm not sure who exactly gave them that rating, or, I mean, I remember being in Long Beach and they said when it's like the best biking cities in the country. Coming into downtown, you could get some perspectives. Unique architecture. What's interesting is a lot of the content out there around Detroit, you see a lot of this, like what's called ruin porn. You know, people really highlighting a lot of the ruins of Detroit right now. It's not always so easy to come by that. We've been riding around for a little bit here, and I could try to like find it and show it to you, but it's really not like everywhere, at least not in this area. I mean, there still are definitely some areas that are abandoned or whatever else, but it's like very different than one might expect given some of the content that's out there. This is the start of the end of the Riverwalk right now, but it will plan to be completed and more connected once the Centennial Park opens next year. We got the People Mover on top of us here. Detroit does have some unique public transportation, but I will say, as somebody that's been car-free for a bit, still leaves some things to be desired. I found it to be pretty unreliable, unfortunately. Right now, the People Mover I think it's closed for maintenance. So it's like stuff like that, they might close it for like a month. It is free. That is one of the nice things. I'll give Detroit that. I'll give you an extra point on my non-point rating system, having some free public transportation. One of the notable ones is the Q line. I guess what I'll say is that although it's not the best right now, there's definitely the makings for something pretty good. They have a $6 bus from downtown Detroit to the airport. That's nice. This is called Hart Plaza, and I guess they're doing more construction. This is Windsor, Canada, just on the other side of the river here. Some people fish in the Detroit River. Some people eat the fish in the Detroit River. It's kind of a controversial topic. The Renaissance Center. They have like offices here. They have little like showroom of some of their vehicles. And there's kind of a mall. I don't know if I could totally call it that because there's just like a handful of stores and restaurants. One of the things to note is that so you have very wide roads. Occasionally, some of the roads are pretty unsafe, but some of the roads are pretty empty. That's something that, coming from New York, I don't really have that experience as much. So it's like you either have like a lot of cars, which does in some ways like increase the safety because cars can't go fast when there's a lot of them, or you can have narrow roads. That helps improve things, or just like a very low volume of traffic also in some ways improves safety. Although I guess you can have people that are distracted at times, not really paying attention. I guess it'd be a good time to talk about my little crash that I had a couple months ago. At that time, I didn't always drive, but I'd have to drive sometimes if I have to go somewhere a little bit further. As I said, public transportation is not the greatest, but I'm driving into this conference. I'm going through a green light and somebody decided to go through a red light, totaled my car. And I don't know, I decided to kind of like start a little experiment shortly after that and not get another car. And so far it's been pretty good. I mean, I'm sure like in the middle of the winter, maybe I wish I had a car a little bit more. It really makes you think about some of these things and how we get around and how others might depend on some of these different transportation systems. And I like how it encourages me and pushes me to ride my bike more, walk more, think a little bit differently about how I depend on the car. I encourage you guys to try and experiment. I don't encourage you to get into a car crash. That was not something I want to experience again, but nice little garden here. Enjoy this quite frequently with my daughter. The carousel. They give free admission Memorial Day to Labor Day. If you ever did want to take a tour around the city, this is one of the many options. A company called Wheelhouse Detroit, fishing in the Detroit River. Look at that. Yeah, there is some fishing. They say like you shouldn't eat certain fish coming from the Detroit River. Some would say you shouldn't eat any fish coming from the Detroit River. I will admit I have eaten a little bit of fish coming from the Detroit River, and I'm still here. I don't know if I would do it every day. I don't know if I would like eat it as sushi, but it tastes like fish. Don't do this at home, kids. Nice to have these like natural spaces in the city, near the city. This is the Outdoor Adventure Center. It's a favorite of my family when it's open. They did close for the whole month of September. Not too happy about that, but that's okay. Yeah, these things closed. Like, what is like closed for a month? All right, come on. Oh, you know what's funny is that I know this person that is riding this tricycle here. The company that I'm involved with built this tricycle. Howdy. Testing this vehicle out. What's up? How you doing? So this is the electric semi-trike, and this is Seed. All right, dude. See ya. Valday Park. My wife calls it the Sand Park. We got a little like indoor eating area over here. The Riverwalk continues down several miles, but that's Belle Isle. And there's a bridge that you can bike or walk over, which is kind of cool. They got an aquarium there, a free aquarium. Pay what you wish. You do have to pay to cross the bridge in a car, but you don't walking or biking, so You can see a couple of these older buildings. I guess, you know, like this is something here. I think it's not currently in use. A couple of these buildings that are for sale. So this is called the East Side Warehouse District. So you can see there's still some buildings that are not really being utilized, if you will. You could say abandoned, not totally abandoned. Somebody owns them. Somebody's gonna sell them. Actually, there's this soul food restaurant. It's in a building kind of similar to one of these, a little bit bigger. They just listed the building for $15 million. It's really interesting because at one point, some of these buildings probably would sell for several $1,000s. Some buildings even sold for $1 famously. Some houses you could still buy for $1 or $1,000. That gold rush of real estate is not really what it once was, as I hear, but still some interesting things. There's a lot of vacant land, which we'll see a little bit later. Apparently it was quite popular for folks to burn down houses. I remember seeing a house getting burned down in Eminem's movie 8 Mile, and I realized, to learning a bit more, that that was not all that odd of an occurrence. I think a lot of people really wanted to get out of their house, get insurance money. Maybe somebody can talk about some personal experiences around that. I don't really know too much, but this is the Dequindre Cut. I believe at some point this used to be a railway. Now it is a walking and biking path. Some more graffiti or street art. A lot of artists. I think that that's something folks can look at a place like Detroit as more of an open canvas. It's more space to leave your mark, right? A place like New York, maybe it could be a little bit more challenging. It's so expensive and so crowded. Can't really find a space to make your own as easily. They have a little like performing art stage right here, which is kind of cool. So this is the freight yard here, the Dequindre Cut freight yard. They have like little events here and stuff like that. Get drinks. Sometimes they bring food trucks over here. Yeah, like buildings like this is something where you like stereotypically, if that's a word, see pretty often in Detroit. There's a little urban farm with some beehives. When you have a lot of space and it's not super expensive, you can have urban farms. So this is Eastern Market. There's several sheds. I think there's 6 of them. Maybe there's more. Now on Saturdays, it's a public market, but any other day, there's packing, there's meat markets, produce markets, but it's more for commercial applications. Art sculptures or different types of furniture made from auto parts. One well-traveled art installations in Detroit is the Heidelberg Project. We're not going to bike over there today, but definitely something worth checking out while you're here. Pretty unique. You see Ford Field and some of the other buildings underway. So I guess you could say this is one of the more like upscale areas of Detroit called Brush Park. A lot of new homes, still some old homes mixed in, which is kind of interesting. Fun restaurants and bars and cafes and such. You can see actually some historic homes kind of mixed in with some updates, and then, you know, some different townhouses and all that sort of stuff, which is, I guess this would tend to be one of the more desirable areas to live in Detroit, maybe partly noted by the prices of the homes. I wonder what you guys think. Is this different than what you expected to see of Detroit? Maybe more people have visited here than I, but so this is Commerce Park. I don't know how you pronounce that, but this is where the Detroit Tigers play football, baseball, and basketball, all within kind of a walk of each other. So this is Woodward. This is kind of the main strip in Detroit, I guess you could say. I believe Woodward is the first road in America. What do you guys think about the bike infrastructure so far, huh? Well, just documenting what we see here. Unfortunately, fairly common occurrence in Detroit. One thing I learned after I had my car crash is that it's quite frequent that folks don't stop at red lights. Kind of famous barbecue spot in Detroit called Slows. This is like a, you know, fun younger vibe over here. Wayne State University is right here. They have this Midtown Loop. I should probably know what that is. I will say that as somebody on a bike, I appreciate when I see that sign because it generally means that there's some bike infrastructure around. All right, we've got cobblestones. That looks interesting. It says do not enter. What do you think? Should we enter? What is this? We got one of those signs. Historic site. First local historic district. All right, let's check out some of these houses over here. There is some really nice architecture. Detroit has had its ups and downs and maybe back on the upswing right now. It had some pretty high highs, some of the highest in the country. As Tara tells me, it's one of the top 5 cities in the country at one point. Is that on population or what? Somehow it was a top 5. Somebody had a list and Detroit was number 5 on it. So apparently, around the 1950s, Detroit was the 4th largest city in the US and actually the richest city in the world. Pretty serious. I guess at that time, they were really at the heat of it. I guess it was like, what was it, early 1900s when they started building cars here. Took it up a notch with the assembly line and all that. It's really interesting how the war impacted the economy, making cars to making weapons and bombs and planes and all sorts of stuff. And apparently that's how we won the war. Detroit was kind of a critical piece of that. It's interesting to think about how manufacturing and the economy related to manufacturing, pretty critical to society, and how certain factors like wars can drive that. I've never really ridden over here. I think it could be kind of cool just to check out this Wayne State. Nice little campus here. You see, you could definitely get around on a bike here. Yeah, I guess I'm technically supposed to be riding on the roadway there, but get a better view this way. All right, Tara says you can get further on a bike here, seemingly get further on a bike here safely than you can in Long Beach. I think this is a really important detail. The hot take from Tara is that it seems more connected. I would agree with that. You know, definitely don't mean to be hating on Long Beach here. It's just like, it's interesting to think about, you know, what really matters in bike infrastructure, what works, what doesn't work, what it takes to actually get people out. My challenge with being car-free in Detroit is some things are just far. It's a very large city geographically, but in theory, the city was really built for a lot more people than it houses currently. It's kind of got like similar vibes as other cities, but you can't help but feel it's a bit empty at times. Rolling up to the Motown Museum, Hitsville, USA. Apparently, like several of these buildings, they're all kind of like part of the Motown Museum. One thing I will note, if you want to go to the Motown Museum, they only do guided tours and you need to schedule them in advance. So apparently they like kept on adding buildings. I don't really know the whole history, but this might be a little bit more stereotypical of what some of the, you know, kind of different videos out there you'll see of Detroit, but it's more in the outer parts of Detroit. You see this, where it's like, yeah, some houses getting renovated, some houses just not here anymore. It's actually, it is a bit more on the upswing. I would imagine, you know, 5-10 years ago, it was very different over here. So this is a bike lane, but one that I don't feel quite as safe on. Maybe that'll change. This type of road is a little bit more stereotypical of a lot of the roads you find in Detroit, which are pretty wide. Although it's got a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, quite frequently people are doing 50. But this is a cool area. It's called Core City. We're gonna go check this little spot out. They have these really unique kind of houses. So it's like a, I don't know, something kind of experimental type community in a lot of ways. I think we see it better from the other side. Let's go over there. So I guess that's one of the things that, you know, having more space, having, you know, more empty land, maybe folks are more open to experimenting with new ways of building. To my understanding, part of the point here is that it's a lot cheaper to construct these types of homes. They had made some sort of deal. I guess they used those things historically, maybe for other types of structures, not necessarily homes. Kind of an innovative idea, and maybe one that it might be difficult to get people to accept so easily, but to my understanding, the guy that started it, he had a feeling that people in Detroit might be more accepting of this idea than others. What do you guys think? Would you live in one of these houses? I think I would. Maybe I'm just a weirdo though. I guess here's an example of one of the houses that was burnt, or perhaps the house next to it was burnt, and this one just got some of the heat. But this is the type of house that you might be able to buy for $1,000 or whatever the case may be. Hopefully this is like a little bit of a better perspective of Detroit than maybe some of the other content that's out there. As I mentioned, like my first time coming out here a year ago, my perception was very different than what I had seen, and I feel like so many people focused on the negative. But there's a lot positive going on here, and I'm excited to be here, to be just a little part of that, you know. So this is the monorail for the people mover. Just does kind of a loop around the city. We have some of these little parks in the center of the city. Not too much activity at the moment. I guess everybody's at work. So this is like really downtown. Some different shopping, restaurants, and whatever else around. It's kind of nice, the water feature all around it. I guess I imagine it keeps it pretty cool in here, you know? Because everybody's preparing for lunchtime over here. A lot of the buildings down here, they're all commercial. I think we're getting close to the end of this ride here. Got to get some breakfast. The deal is, with Tara, we always got to consider the gluten-free options. We're going to a place, what do they have, gluten-free pancakes? If it makes you happy, can't be that bad. Who says that? Sheryl Crow? All right, see you in there. Hudson Cafe. Peace. That's the Q line. Free shuttle goes north and south. I wish it went a little further. I did tell you guys that the public transportation is not so great here. I feel like I should elaborate on that. The routes are decent. It's just that they're pretty unreliable in actually showing up. And then the other issue is that it just takes a long time. There it is. So sometimes you got to get creative with locking. One thing I will note is that I think you don't have professional bike thieves in Detroit. In New York and California, there's specifically professional bike thieves, and that makes it more challenging to use a bike. Here, 1 lock, I'm fine. California, I'm like 3 locks, still might not be fine. Or maybe, I don't know. I don't know what's worse, if it's like worse in LA or California. I would like go to the movies. Like that's like a good indicator for me. Would you like lock up your bike and go to the movies? It's pretty safe. I wonder. Would you do that in your city? I think there's a lot of cities that you can do that. It's just like these like handful of big cities. It just kind of stinks. This, by the way, there are some like hazards to this lockup strategy, but doing it anyway. All right, that's it. Just 1 lock. It's also like we're gonna be right in that restaurant. We could like go and like see the bike. Got a little excited about the food, so sorry we didn't get the picture perfect dishes coming out here, but it's good so far. Would recommend. All right, well, that was a good tour. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's kind of a lot, and we're gonna hopefully piece something together interesting for you. Yeah, I think you'll be seeing more videos from Detroit. Let us know other things you want to see. We'll likely eventually do a tour inside here. I think that could be kind of cool. Hopefully I'll see you in a future video. Well, take care.